Good morning. There we are. It's good to be back. Been a little bit. I think I've been gone for 3 weeks. Playing hooky. The wife wanted to go camping, and then the wife wanted to go to the beach, and I was a good husband, and I took her to do that. So it's good to be back in the house. I haven't learned sit and roll over yet, but I'm getting there. I love a man who knows his place. The chirps are already coming. So it's good to be back. It's good to be back with our extended family. Thank you all so much. And let's pray, and we'll get into the worship. Heavenly Father, Lord, I thank you so much for this day, Lord. I thank you so much for the sunshine. Lord, I thank you so much for the rain. Lord, I thank you so much for the rest you provided me and the wife and the family, Lord, on our vacation. Lord, I thank you so much for providing the means to do so. Lord, I thank you so much for Pastor Ron and the amazing church family, Lord. I thank you so much for this Sunday after the word that's going to be delivered and the worship that we're going to look to you, Lord. I just hope it is pleasing. And Lord, I just thank you so much for the good and perfect thing you provide. In Jesus' name, amen.
Can anything ever separate us from Christ's love? Does it mean he no longer loves us if we have trouble or calamity or persecuted or hungry or destitute or in danger or threatened with death? As the scriptures say, for your sake we're killed every day. We're being slaughtered like sheep. No, despite all these things, overwhelming victory is ours through Christ who loved us. And I'm convinced that nothing can ever separate us from God's love. Neither death nor life, neither angels nor demons, neither our fears for today nor our worries about tomorrow, not even the powers of hell can separate us from God's love. No power in the sky above or in the earth below, indeed nothing in all creation will ever be able to separate us from the love of God that is revealed in Christ Jesus our Lord. Anybody want victory in Jesus? Then you have it. Let's sing it. Victory in Jesus. greet one another. When you hear us start singing, come back to your seat. We are more than conquerors through Christ. Okay? And here's the mystery that made that happen. God figured out, because he knew before the beginning of the time that we have seen this universe in existence, that once he created man, man would need a Savior. Man needs a Savior. Jesus came. He gave his life. He rose from the dead. He's alive forevermore, and we have hope. And that's a mystery to anybody that doesn't understand who God is and what the Bible says, isn't it? It's foolishness to religious people, and it's a stumbling block to people who don't believe in God. So we need to remember that God loves us, God has a plan, and this next song that we're going to sing is called Come to Hold the Wondrous Mystery. tells the whole story, doesn't it? And there's a word in there that sometimes we look at and we say, in our culture, condescended means you look down your nose at somebody. You kind of have pity on them because you think they're dumb or stupid or they don't deserve. Well, condescended in this case means we couldn't find our way to God, so he came to us. Right? He left his throne. He left glory. He lowered himself, and he put on human flesh to come and find us and make us his. What an amazing God. Anybody believe that this morning? What an amazing God. And because he's an amazing God, the grace that he offers can flow into our lives, cleanse us, cover us, and give us everything that God wants us. Grace flows down. before time began, you saw fit to make a way that we could be yours. You loved us enough to give us choice. Adam and Eve chose to disobey you. Their disobedience caused man to be separated from you. But you weren't satisfied with that. Because you are a gracious and loving God, Jesus came. He gave his life, the once-for-all sacrifice, that we might have the opportunity for our sins to be forgiven and to be reunited with you the way that you planned for it to be before time began. Father, I pray that people out there in the world that don't understand your grace, your mercy, your love, would understand it. I pray that we would be the messengers, the ambassadors. Paul says we are ambassadors sent forth to reunite people with you. And Father, I pray that as we live our lives, as we try to trust you and serve you to the best of our ability, that we would always remember we're not perfect. That's not an excuse. And your grace is always there. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Well, we have about this week and next week, and we'll be through the book of Ruth. And I'm wondering how many people have asked themselves, Pastor Ron, this book is only 4 chapters long. Why are we taking so long to get through it? Because if you just read it like a novel, you miss everything that's there, don't you? If you read it like the newspaper, you get a couple nice little story, but you don't understand the underlying things that are going on behind the story. And we need to know what happens when trials come our way, especially trials that the Lord allows to come our way, right? That's why we've called this whole sermon series, Facing the Trials the Lord Brings Our Way. Some people might say, well, it wasn't very nice of God to allow everything that happened to Naomi and Ruth. It wasn't very nice. It had to happen to fulfill God's promise. Sometimes when we look at the things that happen in life, there's a higher purpose. We don't understand it at the time. Sometimes we don't see it. But one of these days, when we get to heaven, we'll understand it. Now, I've explained this before. It's been a long time ago here in service, but I'll explain it like this in a funeral service sometimes. You know, anybody ever seen a tapestry? You know, where they weave all the little strings together and they make a beautiful picture when it's hanging on the wall. Can be a war scene, can be a big stag, elk, or whatever standing up there in the top of a mountain looking majestic. It could be about anything. God sees that side of the picture. He's the one pulling the strings. When we look, all we see is the backside of it. And guess what? The backside of it is just a bunch of tangled up knots. That's all the world is. So when we're trying to figure out what's going on in the world, we're dealing with all the knots and the tangles and things like that. And we can't see what the picture looks like. So one of these days, God's going to lay it out in front of us and say, that's why, and that's why, and that's why, and here you are. Wow. I wish I could have that now. Don't you? Don't you wish God would just peel back a little bit and say, this is why that happened, and this is why you're going to go through whatever you're going to go through at whatever time you're going to go through it. I don't think that would help us one bit. I don't think it would. Because you know what the first thing we'd do would be? Same thing we do. God, why? Why? Why do I have to go? Why am I going to have to go through that? Why did I have to go through that? Why? And then we sound like a little kid when you start to give them an answer and you say this and they say why. And you say this and they say why. And you say this and they say why. Anybody ever had that conversation before? Yes. Right? So we're just like little kids, very impatient. We don't know what the big picture looks like. And when we're going through stuff, we wonder why. Well, last week we were at the threshing floor. And we saw Ruth, who was helped by Naomi, to come up with a plan to try to improve their situation. And if you remember the story, it was very innocent. It was very done with integrity on both Boaz's part and Ruth's part as they had their little conversation, which we're going to visit here in just a second before we jump into what we're going to do today. And the thing that I pointed out last week is this. In the entire book of Ruth, other than the fact that Naomi blames God for everything, and Boaz offers blessings in God's name, we never see God working anywhere yet, out in front. He's always working behind the scenes. He's always making things happen. And sometimes in our life, we're in a situation wondering, where's God? Well, I'll tell you, God's right there. He's promised to never leave us and never forsake us. He's promised to never cast us away, okay? What did we read this morning? Nothing can separate us who are in Christ Jesus. That means people who have repented of their sins and become born again. Nothing can separate us from the love of Christ. That doesn't apply to people that don't have a relationship with Jesus. It does not apply to them, okay? They are separated from God by what? Sin, okay? Sin separates people from God. And so as we look into the story here just a little bit today, in chapter 1, verse 20, if you remember, Naomi claimed that it was the Lord's fault that she was bitter and empty upon her return to Jerusalem or to Bethlehem. And she said in her exact words, God has made it bitter for me. I tell you, there's been times in my life where it's been a little bit bitter. Anybody else? A little bitter. The problem is, bitter sometimes grows into cancer, and it affects us at the very core of who we are. And it's kind of bitter and sour are a little different. Anybody, you understand that, right? Bitter and sour. But you know, sometimes when things are bitter, you get a sour taste in your mouth, don't you? Anybody? I'll never forget. The kids used to pull this on Terry all the time. Anybody remember when Warheads first came out? That was before Sour Punch Kids and all that stuff. You know, today everything's sour, right? Well, my wife, God love her, she is about the most naive person in the world, the most trusting person in the world. She loves her children, and they know that they would never, ever, ever do anything to harm her. So we were driving down the road one day, and Michael had a pack of Warheads. He said, Mom, you want to try a piece of this candy? She said, Michael, is it going to be sour? Oh, no, Mom. No, Mom. She looked over at me and said, oh, it's good. You'll like it. She popped that thing in her mouth and was like, you guys got it. It's sour, it's sour. Right? So what'd she do? She spit it out. Okay? That's what we need to do when better things happen in our life. We need to just spit it out and let it go. Don't we? Not keep chewing on it. Not hope that it'll taste better. Just spit it out and get rid of it, and then it's not affecting who you are. Okay? But Naomi said, God has made it bitter for me. She didn't say, because of my choices and because of my husband's choices, all these things have happened, and now I'm stuck where I am. She said, God's made it hard on me. God's made me bitter. God's the cause of my bitterness. Is God the cause of anybody's bitterness? No. Is God the cause of somebody being angry? No. We all have choice. We choose to be angry. We choose to be bitter. We choose to be happy. We choose to be sad. We choose. Okay? And when we see that she's blaming God, that's one of the first places where God's mentioned. But then God uses Boaz to remedy her emptiness. In chapter 3, verse 17, which is where we were last week, we're actually going to start up. Let's see. We're going to start here in verse 13 of chapter 3. I'll read a little bit before we get into the actual sermon for today. Boaz tells Ruth, stay here for the night, and in the morning I will talk to him. Who's him? The closer relative, the kinsman redeemer that was in the spot right before him. He says, let him, if he's willing to redeem you, very well. Let him marry you. But if he's not willing, then surely as the Lord lives, I will redeem you myself. Now lie down here until morning. And again, that was nothing dirty. There was nothing foul. There was nothing filthy about it. It was very full of integrity the way it happened. So Ruth laid at Boaz's feet until the morning, but she got up before it was light enough for the people to recognize each other. And Boaz said, no one must know that a woman was here at the threshing floor. Again, he's protecting his reputation and her reputation. Okay? Not that they're hiding anything. Then Boaz said to her, bring your cloak and spread it out. He measured 6 scoops of barley, and we don't know how big those scoops were, but it must have been quite a little bit, into the cloak and placed it on her back. Then he returned to the town. When Ruth went back to her mother-in-law, Naomi asked, what happened, my daughter? Ruth told Naomi everything Boaz had done for her, and she added, he gave me these 6 scoops of barley, and he said, don't go back to your mother-in-law empty-handed. Then Naomi said to her, just be patient, my daughter, until we hear what happens. The man won't rest until he has settled things today. I think she just switched from bitter to hopeful, don't you? Bitter to hopeful. If you know somebody that's bitter, they don't always have to be bitter. Okay? There is hope in the world. And that hope is only found in God. Hope is not found in things. Hope is not found in pleasure. Hope is not found in anything but God. That's where we find our hope. And when we find our hope in Him, we find our joy. And joy washes away bitterness, doesn't it? It sure does. Okay? So now we see Naomi kind of changing her tune a little bit. She's looking like things are going to be looking up. Because all she's seeing is, woe is me, and poor me, and oh no. And now it's like, wow, he did that, and he said that, and I know he's a man of integrity. He's going to do something. Okay? In other words, Boaz was a man that could be relied upon to keep his word. Right? That's missing in our world today, isn't it? People who keep their word, who say what they're going to do, and they do what they say. Let's read chapter 4, verses 1 through 12, and then we're going to break it down just a little bit. And we're going to find out that there's kind of a courtroom setting. Okay, Boaz is going to corner his rival. Boaz went to the town gate and took a seat there. Just then, when did he do that? Immediately after he left the threshing floor. He didn't wait around. He was going to make sure it got done. Because what happens when we make our mind up we're going to do something and then we pause before we start to do it? Anybody ever have other thoughts that jump in, other things that jump up, other crises that arise, right? He had tunnel vision. He had laser-like focus. He was going to go do what he said he was going to do. He's a little bit motivated to do it, too, you think? Anybody think? Yeah. Watch this. So he's a righteous man, number one, and because Ruth is pretty, number two. Boaz went to the town gate and took a seat there. Just then, the family redeemer he had mentioned came by. So Boaz called out to him, "Come over here and sit down, friend. I want to talk to you." So they sat down together. Then Boaz called 10 leaders from the town and asked them to sit as witnesses. And Boaz said to the family redeemer, "You know Naomi, who came back from Moab? She's selling the land that belonged to our relative Elimelech. I thought I should speak to you about it so you can redeem it if you wish. If you want the land, then buy it here in the presence of these witnesses. But if you don't want it, let me know right away, because I'm next in line to redeem it." The man replied, "All right, I'll redeem it." Okay. How many of you have ever heard about a good deal and said, "Yes"? Only to find out your answer should have been, Anybody? Anybody ever do that before? It looks too good to be true. Usually what happens? It is too good to be true. He didn't even think about it. Okay, let's just look at this. Boaz got him cornered. Let's just get into their heads. Boaz is thinking, I got to get this done. I know he's got to come through here to come to town. When he comes, I'm going to call out to him. So he does. Okay? He stations himself at the city gate. Now, how many of you have ever come walking along and looked up and somebody is looking at you like they're waiting for you to show up? Anybody? What's the first thing that pops into your mind if you don't already have an appointment with that person or you don't know what they want? What's the first thing that comes into your mind? What the heck do they want? Why is he sitting there waiting? Why is he looking at me like that? Right? What did I do? That's where we go next, right? Am I in trouble? Right? Sometimes when people come up to me and say, "Pastor Ron, I'm going to ask you a question." Mariah will do that to me once in a while, and I'll say, "Am I in trouble? What did I do wrong?" And she'll come up with something. Huh? She always has some answer. The older she gets, the worse it gets. She learned from her mother. In verse 2, he calls the guy over and says, "Hey, I want to talk to you." Then he calls out to the crowd and says, "I need 10 of you people to come over here and witness this conversation." Well, let's get back in the kids and Redeemer's mind again. Now what's he thinking? Oh, it must be some big thing. I must have really done something. He must really want something. Why do we need all these people? He said he wanted to talk to me. Now he's including all these other people in the conversation. Okay? I don't know about you, but back when we still had the college ministry, anybody remember the George Floyd riots? What was going on simultaneously with the George Floyd riots? COVID, right? And I got a message on my computer, on my text message one day, and it was all the students were at home. They weren't at school anymore, and it was we want to talk to you on a Zoom call. Somebody wanted to talk to me on a Zoom call. I said, okay. So I thought, well, I don't get to see him face-to-face anymore, so I opened up the Zoom call, and there was 42 of them there on the Zoom call. And so I got ambushed. Does that make sense to everybody? I got ambushed. And no matter what I said to try to defend myself, I became not Pastor Ron, the guy who loves us and does everything for us and helps us do things and takes us to see our family when we're sick and prays over us and sits up and asks our questions automatically because I was white. I'm a racist. Okay? So anytime somebody says, I need to talk to you, there's this little part of me that goes, oh, I wonder what's going to go on this time. Anybody? You ever get there? You ever have that? Anybody ever waiting for the next shoe to drop? Sure. Okay. And so he calls him over. They sit down. He says, yeah, I'll talk to you. Then he calls out to people at the gate because the city leaders in those days used to sit by the gate. They didn't hide up in City Hall. They didn't hide in an air-conditioned office. They did all their business out at the city gate in front of other people. They even made their judgments out in front of the people, okay? That doesn't mean they didn't have a canopy over the top of it where they weren't in the sun beating down on their heads and things like that, but they just did their business there. They did political business there. They did real estate business there. They did all kinds of family business there. They did everything they needed to do right there out in front of the city where everybody could see it. Wouldn't it be nice if our government did it right where everybody could see it? Because if they do it right where you can see it, what can you do? You can hold them accountable. We can't hold anybody accountable, can we? We can't. We don't know who's cheating where and who's doing what. We don't. And so I just try to get in the character's mind that's in the story, and I'm thinking that guy, I'm thinking, man, what's the big deal? And I'm thinking, you haven't talked to me forever. Why do you want to talk to me now? He knew of him, but he didn't call him by name. What did he call him? Friend. He didn't say, hey, cuz. He didn't say, hey, uncle. What did he say? Friend. So when you look at that word friend, what does that tell you about their relationship? Was it very close or very non-existent? Non-existent pretty much, okay? It's like your second cousin 3 times removed kind of thing. Does that make sense to everybody? You only hear about them when they're born, and you never ever meet them in your life, and then when somebody dies, they show up at the funeral, and that's how you know you're related to them. I have people like that in my family, I promise. Anybody else? Yep. Okay. He calls 10 leaders of the town to be witnesses to the contract that he's proposing. All right, he's proposing a contract. And this guy doesn't know that yet. In verse 3, he presents the opportunity and the problem at hand. Let's go back and read it again. Verse 3. Boaz said to the family redeemer, you know Naomi who came back from Moab. She's selling the land that belonged to our relative Elimelech. That's the problem. Okay? Well, here's the problem with that. As the widow Naomi had no right to buy or sell any kind of real estate, she was at the mercy of somebody in her family to come and take over. And in taking over the land as a kinsman redeemer, he got the land, but he had to take her too. And I'm telling you, if I'm that guy and I know who Naomi is, the first words out of my mouth was to be, I'll take the land, you can keep her. Anybody else? I do not want bitter coming into my house. Huh? Yeah. Bitter to the core, okay? And the guy's got to stop and think for just a second. Wow, Elimelech must have had a little bit of something And if I had just a little bit of something to what I already have, then I'll have more of what I had, and it'll be more than a little bit of something. Okay? And isn't that what happens when people die most of the time? You know, Linda and I have had this conversation several times about family coming to meet for the funeral, and somebody else from the family is already at the house getting what they want so they can get out with it before anybody comes by to say anything. Right? And when somebody's dying in the hospital, all the buzzards are sitting on the gut wagon, waiting for that person to die so they can all flock in and get what they want. You know? Elimelech's been dead for a long time, a while, okay? His sons have been dead. There's nobody that owns the property. Like we said, we didn't know where she was living, but now we know she must have been in the house, and it had to be dilapidated because they were gone for at least 10 years before he died. Not including the sons and not including the time they waited until they came back. So I'm thinking, you know, there are a lot of people who flip houses and things like that. Would you just buy a house that you didn't go see? Or would you want to check it out and decide if you wanted it first or not? Anybody? Who's going to buy a property sight unseen? Oh, there are people out there that do it all the time. I had somebody send me some kind of thing about my house, which I bought in 2000, Terry and I bought in 2003, and we paid what we could afford to pay for it then, and they offered us less now than what it was worth when we bought it then. Sight unseen, we buy properties. Well, you're not buying mine, right? And what do? They turn around and they either become slumlords or they give you what they're going to give you, then they jack the price up 100% and they sell somebody else the price that they gave you. And that's how people make money. And this guy had to be thinking, wow, I don't know that this property has some value. And he jumps right in and he says, yeah, I'll take it. Okay? Problem is, the land could not be sold in perpetuity. That means sold outside the family to somebody else forever, but it had to be redeemed by the clan. We read that a couple weeks ago, and I'll put the reference back down there for you, Leviticus 25, 23 through 24. It says if somebody dies, somebody else takes the property, they raise their family, the person that died, they take their family, and they make sure that an inheritance goes to the son of whoever owned the property or somebody from the family of whoever owned the property. And you know, there are a lot of times in our life today where people make decisions that sound really, really good at the beginning, but when you get to the end of it, it's not really that good. Remember when they first came out with, you could, if you had equity in your house, if you owned your house, you could borrow against your house with this company or companies. And I forget what kind of mortgage it was called, but they would pay you a stipend every month for as long as you live in the house, and then when you die, they get to sell the house, and if there's any money left over, your family gets the money. Reverse mortgage, that's it, reverse mortgage. Anybody heard of that? I know somebody right now, a good friend of mine, who took out a reverse mortgage, and when it comes down to it, if they live another 4 or 5 years, the value of that property based on what they paid for it is going to be a whole lot more. But what they're living on off the reverse mortgage is going to have eaten all their equity up and eaten everything else up. And in order for their family to have that house, they're going to have to buy it back from the mortgage company. Okay? There are a lot of people in our world today that are losing their homes like that. Families are losing their family homes because people are living longer, right? And they borrow money against their house and borrow money against their house. And the next thing you know, when they die, there's nothing left. There's no equity left whatsoever. And back in those days, you couldn't do that. Property that sat there fallow. It just sat there unused. The weeds grew up. Nobody took care of it until somebody came along and redeemed it. Okay? And isn't that what happens in our lives when we don't have Christ? Don't our lives just lay fallow? The weeds grow up. The sin chokes things out until Jesus comes along and redeems us by the blood that he shed on the cross. When we open our hearts up to him and say, Lord, save me, forgive me, help me to become the person you want me to be. And then he comes in to the rescue. And guess what? We become part of God's family. And for this man, who Boaz is offering this property to, Naomi was going to become part of his family. Okay? Extended family, but close family now. Because in verse 4, he had the right of first refusal. Let's look at verse 4. I thought I should speak to you about it so you can redeem it if you wish. If you want the land, then buy it here in the presence of these witnesses. But if you don't want it, let me know right away, because I'm next in line to redeem it after you. The man replied, all right, I'll redeem it. Now he's got some competition to help him make his decision, right? He's thinking, well, it's been sitting there empty for a long time. Maybe it doesn't butt up to his property. Maybe it's on the other end of the county or whatever. That just gives me something else to have to do. But it's worth something, so I'll take it. And Boaz says, well, if you don't want it, I do. Did he know what Boaz's motivation was? He did not know what Boaz's motivation was. And he did not know what was in the package. How many of you like surprises? Anybody like surprises? How many of you are actually control freaks and you hate surprises? Anybody? I'll put my hand way up in the air. Anybody? Come on. Who's a control freak? Who hates surprises? Right? Yeah, the rest of you are lying. If you want the land, I defer to you. Wow. That's kind of a nice thing to do, isn't it? And it was the right thing to do. And Boaz is one of those guys that does the right thing. Okay? He didn't try to slip in any kind of slimy things or, but it's full of weeds and it's full of rocks. It doesn't grow crops very good. But, if I was you, I wouldn't take it. He didn't do that. You have the right to first refusal. I defer to you. Man, what would our world look like if people conducted business that way today? Honestly, with integrity. And that's why we've been looking at this book the way that we have. To just read through this and see it, it's like, well, that's a custom that I don't understand, and that doesn't make sense to me, so I'm just going to buzz on by that and get to the end so that I can start something new that I won't understand either. Okay? And this guy jumps at the chance without considering the details. He says, all right, I'll redeem it. But then in verses 5 through 6, now we see the conditions of the sale. How many of you would like to know the conditions of the sale before you commit to the sale? Yeah, right? I want to know what I'm getting. I want to know what it's going to cost. I want to know what it's going to entail. But you can't get all your questions answered, right? This guy didn't even get a question answered. He didn't say, well, what about this, or what about that, or what about this, or what about that? He didn't say anything. And also, we need to go back and visit this. It says, if you want to buy this from Naomi couldn't collect the money for it. Basically, what he was saying is, if you want to take this burden off of Naomi and have this property, you have to commit to take care of her the rest of your life. Okay? That's what he's saying. That's the price. There's no money changing hands in this story. Not a dollar, not a dime. Not a denarius. Okay? No money's changing hands. The price is, you take the land, you take Naomi. Okay? And when this guy says, okay, then Boaz comes around and gives him the conditions. In verse 5, look what he says. Then Boaz told him, now, of course, by the way, your purchase of the land from Naomi also requires that you marry Ruth, the Moabite widow. That way she can have children who will carry on her husband's name and keep the land in the family. Now, what was the purpose of the kinsman redeemer? To keep the land in the family. The guy said, okay, I'm the first kinsman redeemer. I'll take it to keep the land in the family. By the way, Ruth came back with her. Ruth was married to one of her sons. Her husband is dead. Her son is dead. Somebody from that family needs to be able to have that property one of these days as their inheritance. So you need to marry her. You need to have a son with her so she can have the property back, or their family can have the property back. Because if you remember, anybody that sold their property to another family or member or whatever on the year of Jubilee, which was every 70th year, they got their property back. Okay? If they lived long enough to get it, their family got it back if they didn't. So that everything was freed up in 70 years. So the guy's probably thinking, well, 70 years is a long time from now. Yeah, I think I'll do that. But then when he finds out he's got to marry Ruth, here's the problem. Taking Ruth as a wife was to ensure the lineage of Elimelech and keep the land in the family. They didn't have a 7-day return or 90 days, send it back. They didn't have that. Once you made the commitment, once you did the deal, you did the deal, okay? And you negotiated before the deal, and that's what they're doing. They're negotiating, okay? They're negotiating. Here's the problem. Here's what's going on. You can fix this problem if you want to. Yes, I'll fix the problem. Well, here you go. There's a little bit more I didn't tell you. You kind of jumped in a little quick, okay? You got to marry Ruth. And you got to bring up kids with Ruth so that one day Elimelech's lineage can have the property back. Now, there's not really a problem with that, is there? Won't it still be in the family? And even though Archie Bunker wasn't there, won't they all be in the family? All in the family? It's all in the family. It's not some stranger coming to buy it. It's a relative coming to take care of what he should take care of. And he is the first redeemer, okay? The first redeemer. It goes to the first guy that's in line. Just like in the Old Testament. If you look at the stories in the Old Testament, no matter how many kids somebody had in the Old Testament, who got the inheritance? The oldest one, right? Except for, anybody remember? Jacob and Esau. Remember that story? Who was the oldest? Esau. Who got the blessing? Jacob. Whoa. Esau was happy about that, wasn't he? He begged his dad, oh, isn't there a blessing for me? Isn't there some left over for me? Why does he get it? Right? First in line gets first dibs. Okay? I can remember when my grandfather died, my mom's dad. He was a railroader. And he had railroad watches, collected pocket watches, railroad. He was the guy who rode back in the caboose, back when they still had a caboose. And there was a gold one, there was a silver one, and there was a bronze one. Just like medals in the Olympics. Okay? My cousin, 3 months older than me, he got the gold one. I'm second in line. I got the silver one. And because we're from 2 different children, and the third, my uncle's son, oldest son, got the bronze one. Okay? So that's just the way it's set up. That's the way things go. That's the way it happens. Still happens today like that sometimes, doesn't it? People decide what their kids are going to get when they're gone. And they're like, well, okay, whatever. You guys aren't even awake this morning. Here he goes in verse 6, jumping back out of the deal. Well, I can't redeem it, the family redeemer replied. Because watch this. This might endanger my own estate. You redeem the land. I cannot do it. He's saying, not saying I cannot. What's he saying? I will not do it. Because why? When we mix that family with my family, if something happens to me, then they might think they can have what I already have. And that would cheat my kids out of it. Okay? And then that what happens in mixed marriages sometimes? Sure. When that same grandfather died, he had all those watches, and he had guns and all that kind of stuff that was supposed to go to his son and grandsons and all that kind of stuff. And the woman that he was married to, not my grandmother, who he married after he divorced my grandmother, she called the cops and made everybody give everything back because she said she was the one who was going to determine who got what. It happens, doesn't it? Some step comes in, the family gets nothing. Happened to my uncle, one of my dad's brothers, the one that I was telling you about that got involved with the nurse that was taking care of my aunt that was really sick. All right? They got married. He had one son. One. And when there's only one child, what are they supposed to get? Everything. All of it, right? All of it. Well, here's the problem. She got him to change his will while he was really sick and before he died, and she got all of it, and my cousin got nothing. Not one thing that belonged to his dad. Nothing. Zero. How would that leave a bitter, sour taste in your mouth? Yeah, it would. But it happens all the time, doesn't it? It happens. Because people are people and people are sinful. And at the root of everybody's sinful heart is a little 4-letter word called EVIL, right? Evil comes out when people find themselves in certain situations. But let's look at this up to this point. This guy is not called by name, and that's significant. He was the primary redeemer. We should know his name. We should. We know Boaz's name. Why do we know Boaz's name? Because he's been a man of integrity, who's trusted in God, who's done what he said he's going to do, who's taken care of Ruth and Naomi because he sees their situation. He sees Ruth as a human being. He makes sure that just as a human being, their needs are being taken care of, plus a little bit more so they can earn a little bit more so they can get a couple other things they need. That's why Boaz's name is mentioned. This guy comes in, he has a chance to make a difference in their lives, and he says, I ain't doing it. After he said what? Okay, I'll do it. What does that tell you right there about him? He's a man of no integrity. He had ulterior motives for wanting the land. He didn't care about Naomi. He didn't care about his responsibility as the Redeemer. He just wanted to add to what he had. Are there people like that in our world today? They just want what they want because they can have it. Okay? And you know, there are a lot of families that are destroyed over that kind of stuff. A lot of families that are absolutely destroyed because some part of the family does something that totally just disaffects everybody else in the whole family. Okay? We don't know this guy's name. And he ended up not doing his duty in the matter of redemption. Let's turn to Deuteronomy 25. Deuteronomy 25. And you know, as we look at this thing, it's not very far away from Deuteronomy to Ruth, because Deuteronomy was done while they were wandering around in the desert, and then they came into the promised land, and then they had the judges, and Ruth was a part of the judges. So it wasn't very far after this was given by God. Deuteronomy chapter 25, verses 9 through 10. All right, let's just start at verse, let's look at verse 5. We'll start at verse 5. Watch this. If two brothers are living together on the same property, one of them dies without a son, his widow may not be married to anyone from outside the family. Instead, her husband's brother should marry her, have intercourse with her, to fulfill duties to her as a brother-in-law. Come on, guys. No! No! Right? That was part of the deal back then. The first son she bears to him will be considered the son of the dead brother, so that his name will not be forgotten in Israel. And that's the whole point of this kinsman redeemer, so that they won't be forgotten, okay? But if the man refuses to marry his brother's widow, she must go to the town gate and say to the elders assembled there. Here, that's the regular stuff, right? This is back there. They go to the town gate, and they call the assembly together. My husband's brother refuses to preserve his brother's name in Israel. He refuses to fulfill the duties of a brother-in-law by marrying me. The elders of the town will then summon him and talk with him. If he still refuses and says, I don't want to marry her, the widow must walk over to him in the presence of the elders, pull his sandal from his foot, and spit his face. Woo! Yee-haw! That is the biggest insult you can give to anybody, is a spit in their face. Now, I don't mean a little kid puking in your face. I remember one time I picked Michael up and he puked right in my mouth when he was a baby. You know, if you don't have a weak stomach, that'll give you one. But she's supposed to go over and yank his sandal off. Now, let me tell you this. Can you just see some little woman walking over to a guy and saying, give me your shoe? And he says, no. She's yanking it off his foot. And then she spits a big old greenie right in his face. Right? Wow. I'm glad we don't have that culture today. I really am. We got some weird stuff in our culture today, but I'm glad that's not part of it. Okay? And I'm glad Terry didn't have any sisters. Oh. what happens to a man who refuses to provide his brother with children. Ever afterward, in Israel, his family will be referred to as the family of the man whose sandal was pulled off. Do you know what that means to the guy who said, no, I changed my mind? For the rest of eternity, he's going to be known, even though we don't know him by name. Somebody knew his name, and forever he's going to be the kinsman redeemer who refused to do what God said. Wow. That's almost like a scarlet letter, isn't it? That's almost like they used to do back in the Puritan days when somebody committed adultery. They got an iron really hot with a big A on it, and they stuck it right in the middle of their forehead, and they burned a big scar in their forehead. Why? Because they were an adulterer, and they would always be an adulterer as far as the people saw. But I'm so glad that the grace of God flows down and covers our scars and the marks and the sin that affects us. Aren't you? Aren't you glad that His amazing grace flows down over us and we don't have to be who we were? Okay? This guy didn't realize, apparently didn't understand the concept. And now he's got a stigma attached to his life for the rest of his life. And not only his life, his whole family for the rest of their lives. It's the guy who refused to do what God set forth as the right way to make sure that you take care of him. That'd be hard to take, wouldn't it? How'd you like to be his kid? Dad, change your mind! Come on, Dad. Even his wife would probably say, go ahead. You don't have to go visit her. Just do it. So that we don't have to be that person anymore. It's a black mark. You know, when somebody does something at a job and somebody's trying to get over them or get through them or get by them or hurt them, it's called putting a black mark on them, right? When you go to get a reference, there's a black mark. Or there may be even now the big thing is what? The internet. People write stuff about businesses. People write stuff about people on the internet that's not true. But what's the deal in our world today? Are people really looking for what's true, or are they looking for what's juicy? They want the juicy stuff. They don't care how false it is. They don't care if it's true or false. They immediately make their mind up based on whatever's out there. It's kind of like going to a restaurant. We were getting ready to meet one of my former students, Vincent, who calls me Pops. I'm like his adopted dad. If you remember Vincent, if you've been around long enough, he's about that tall and about that wide across the floor. He's a big boy. And I married him to his wife. And we were getting ready to meet, and they live down in Alexandria, Virginia, and we live up here, so we've been trying to find a place in the middle to meet. So we meet regularly, like every couple months we meet, just to sit and talk and visit and see how they're doing and all that kind of stuff. They always want to know how Charlotte's doing, and they want to see pictures of Charlotte and all that kind of stuff. And so we meet. We try to get together. We try to do things together because we care for each other. Does that make sense to everybody? And we needed a place to eat. We weren't familiar with restaurants in Frederick except the one that we normally meet at, which is called the Mountain View Diner. I don't know if anybody's ever been there before. It's on Patrick Street, but it's closed now. We can't meet there. So what do we have to do? We have to find some place new to eat. So what do? You go to Yelp, and you say, Chinese buffets in Frederick, if that's what you want to do, or steakhouse in Frederick. And then you get a list of the top 10. And then as you look at the top 10, what do they give you? Reviews. I have learned, do not listen to the reviews. Don't. A lot of them are computer generated, and a lot of them are just people who didn't get one thing they wanted, and all of it's bad because they didn't get one thing they liked. And we had two to pick from, and so we picked one. And we went there, and all the reviews were absolutely wrong. The food was delicious. The food was great. Service was good. We had a great time. We actually, anytime we meet them, we always sit there till closing time. We're the last people out of the restaurant when it's time to go. Even though we ate and got done in 30 minutes, we're still there 2 hours later talking. They didn't say get up and leave. You need these seats. They didn't do any of that kind of stuff. So you get a review from people. And I am sure that there was a buzz going around town after this little meeting, don't you? Don't you think everybody had their own opinion of who Boaz was, and everybody had an opinion of who Mr. No Name was? But they know his name. and they were reviewing him to everybody else. So when we see this story and we miss all this stuff because we just read right down through it and we don't understand what the custom is and what's going on, he ended up not doing his job, not being the Redeemer, and in other words, he made his own name disreputable. Disreputable. Why is it that if somebody does something really good, a couple people will acknowledge it, but if somebody does something a little hinky or a little sideways or whatever, everybody wants to talk about it? Isn't that the way it works in our world today? Sure. Okay? Absolutely that's the way it works. If somebody hires somebody to do something and everything's perfect except one thing that they don't like just a little bit, even if that person fixes it, they're still going to say something negative about it. And people will listen to that. And you know what that does? That costs people reputation. That costs people money. That costs people their living and their livelihood. Okay? When in fact, that person's just a jerk. Okay? Yes, I said joke out loud. Jerk. Anybody ever meet a jerk in your life? Don't you want to just reach out and touch them like Ma Bell used to? And I don't mean in a handshake. Right? There are people out there that just need somebody to walk up and give them a Jethro slap on the back of the head if you've ever watched NCIS, right? They just need somebody to smack them right on the back of the head. Maybe it'll jar their brains loose and they figure out there's something else out there than what they're doing. But he has no reputation. He's disreputable. He's not a man of integrity. He's a man who gave his word and then pulled his word back. Wow. I can't tell you how many people I've known in my life who stood in a place like this in front of God and witnesses and said what they said, and the next thing you know, one of them's gone. Right? That makes them disreputable, doesn't it? It makes them who they are, a person with no integrity whatsoever. None. I've known people who have promised to do a job or to help, and every time you need them to help, they always have something else to do. Why not just say, no, I can't help you, or no, I don't want to help you? Why not say that? Why not? It saves face, doesn't it? Or maybe you've invited somebody to church. I'll be ready on Sunday. You call them Saturday night and say, hey, we're going to have church tomorrow. You want to go? Well, this came up, or that came up, or something happened. Okay, check back with me again. And you call them and talk to them, or you meet with them and you talk to them again. Hey, why don't you come out to church? You said you want to go to church somewhere. Why don't you come check it out? And then all of a sudden they got another reason, they got another issue, they got another thing going on, and they don't want to come. You know what you need to do to that person? Quit asking them. Go find somebody new to talk to. Because they have no integrity. They have no reason. They have no intention of doing what they say they're going to do. None. Okay? Now, should they wander in one day after you haven't talked to them, you walk up and say, hey, glad to have you here. It's good, great. Because you know what they did then? They came in because they wanted to, not because they told you they wanted to, but they really didn't want to, and they just had an excuse not to. Let me tell you, I've been in the ministry for a long time, over 3 decades now, and I have seen that happen over and over and over and over and over again. Okay? We've had people come into this church and say, this is the best church I've ever found. I want to be a member. And 3 weeks later, you don't even see them anymore. You don't hear from them. You try to call them. You can't find them. Why do people make decisions like that? It's no different than Mr. No Name saying, I don't want that. And then Boaz says, oh, by the way, you've got to marry Ruth too and have kids. So Elimelech's name continues. I don't want that. Okay? Shouldn't we stop and think about what we're going to do before we say what we're going to do? Should we? Isn't that good practice? My dad used to say it all the time to my mom. She ran off at the mouth all the time. He would say, push in the clutch, put it in the gear, and then open your mouth. Okay? Because if you try to put it in the gear without pushing in the clutch, it just grinds and grinds and grinds and grinds. You don't go anywhere. Right? And it makes a lot of noise, but it doesn't have any kind of outcome that anybody wants. We should stop and think. This guy didn't do it. Boaz has been thinking, though, hadn't he? Anybody think Boaz has been thinking out this whole plan? I'm going to offer this to him. If he said, if he wants it, I'll be okay with that. But now the guy says, I changed my mind. Not going to do it. So now we see a comparison between a man of no integrity a man who's had integrity throughout the whole story. Let's go. Verses 7 through 12, sealing the deal. Now, in those days, it was a custom in Israel for anyone transferring the right of purchase to remove his own sandal, not somebody else to take his sandal off. Like when they didn't do it, he removed his own sandal, and he handed it to the other party. Let's just stop right there. How many of you are grossed out by feet? Anybody? How many of you had stinky feet when you were teenagers? How many of you still have stinky feet? Don't raise your hand. Right? I will never, and I promise you this, I'm a man of my word, I will never go anywhere and let anybody grind on my toenails. Not going to do it. I'm cut my own toenails. They're my toenails. I ain't want anybody playing with my feet. They're my feet. And they stink. Okay? I can remember when I used to go to my grandfather's house, when I moved back here all by myself when I was 17 years old. I'd go visit them, and he'd make me take my shoes off outside. And then he'd go back and say, go put them back on. All right? Can you imagine in those days, in that land, we're in a semi-desert kind of place. They wore sandals. They're walking in the dirt, sand, whatever. What happens when your feet sweat and you're walking with dust all around you? You get what's called toe jam, right? Toe jam. Who wants to pick up somebody else's toe jam sandal? Not this guy. And if somebody wants to hand me their sandal, I say, just lay it right there. That'll be fine. I ain't touching it. Right? Not touching it. No. Don't want to sweat or your stinky feet on my hands. And they didn't have antibacterial stuff back then. You couldn't carry one of those little bottles in your hand, squirt it in and go, and smell like alcohol, right? You can't do that back then. And the custom was, if I'm going to sell Justin a piece of property and he wants it, he's got to take my stinky old dirty nasty sandal. Here's the problem with that. How am I going to get back home? I don't have one sandal in. Am I going to hop back home? Am I going to take my other sandal home, walk barefooted? What am I going to do? It doesn't tell us that. It doesn't say get it back. It says get your sandal. Okay? That's how you seal the deal. How do we seal the deal now? We get a lawyer. We got to have a contract written up. It has to be witnessed by 3 people. We sign in triplicate, duplicate, fourplicate, whatever it's called, and we just sign our names away. And then when we don't do it, they can pull the paper back out. Well, guess what? If I sell Justin a piece of property and I pull off my sandal and I give it to him, how long do you think he's going to keep that sandal around? Yeah. We need to understand that was their culture. If somebody doesn't do what they did, you take their sandal, spit in their face. That's a woman's job. That's what she's supposed to do. If you're selling somebody a piece of property, you pull off your grody old shoe and hand it to them and say, here you go. Hang on to this for me. That proves that we did it. And you did it in front of witnesses. And they're sitting there going, I don't know how bad it really smells. Yuck. Right? Maybe not. Verse 9. Boaz said to the elders and to the crowd standing around, you are witnesses today that I have bought from Naomi the property of Elimelech. Who did he give money to? Who did he give money to? Nobody. He didn't give anybody any money. Basically what he's saying is, I'm buying this with my promise. I'm buying this with my integrity. I am determined that I will take care of her and Ruth, and I'm going to make sure they have a place to live. And he's also saying what? I'm going to raise a kid in Elimelech's name. So he's not only a man of integrity, he's a man who's humble enough to do what God says and raise a kid in another man's name. Okay? Wow. Think about that with me. With the land I've acquired Ruth, the Moabite widow of Mahlon. So that's who his name is going to raise it in, the son of Elimelech, to be my wife. This way she can have a son to carry on the family name of her dead husband and to inherit the family property here in his hometown. You are all witnesses today. Boaz is saying, I don't care about the property. I'm going to do what I need to do. She's going to raise it. If we have a son, she's going to raise that son. It's going to be his property. That's the way it's supposed to be. That's what I'm going to do. My gosh. What a guy. How many of you ladies would like to be married to a guy like that? Anybody? Now, don't be looking at your husband. Just don't move. Just blink your eyes at me. I don't know what you're talking about. No overt signs, right? No overt signs. I get you guys in trouble every time I do that. I see. Right? Then the elders and all the people standing at the gate replied, "We are witnesses. May the Lord make this woman who's coming into your home like Rachel and Leah, from whom all the nations of Israel is descended. May you prosper in Ephrathah and be famous in Bethlehem. May the Lord give you descendants by this young woman who will be like those of our ancestor Perez, the son of Tamar and Judah." Now, isn't that nice that they give some people's names? Why? We would just read right by that and say, well, Tamar and Judah, wow. There are stories in the Bible. They're quoting people who are in the Bible. But as we see this, there's no handshake or legal document, just a smelly, dirty disclaimer. In verse 9, he officially redeems the property of his relative Elimelech, and he guarantees that Naomi is taken care of for the rest of her life. Now, what did we say about Naomi? She was bitter, then she became hopeful. What do you think is going to happen next? She's going to become what? Happy. Okay? Happy. Now she's secure. Now she's got a place to live. Now she knows that everything's going to be all right because Boaz is going to take care of not only Ruth, but her. Because Ruth said, I'm going to take care of Naomi. If Boaz is taking care of Ruth, he's taking care of Naomi. Does that make sense to everybody? By extension, he's doing what he said he was going to do. And he gets a wife as part of the deal. In verses 11 through 12, they verify the transaction, the witnesses do, and they convey their blessings on Boaz and Ruth. Now, I have other things to share about Rachel and Leah. I have other things to share about Tamar and her guy, right? But as we see what's going on here, we're talking about somebody that comes out of that, being the descendants of those relationships. Rachel and Leah, does anybody know who they were? They were Jacob's wives. That he worked for 14 years for his uncle for them to be his wives, and they had 12 children, and those 12 children became the tribe of Israel. Okay? Every one of them became the head of a tribe of Israel. And we'll talk about that a little bit more next week as we finish up the chapter. And then as we look at Judah and Tamar, that's a kind of a woohoo story. Okay? Another man who does not do what God says needs to happen, and a woman steps in and fixes it. That's where I'm going to leave you with that one. I'm not going to tell you where it is. You want to look it up? You look it up. We'll talk about it a little bit next week. Okay? But I'm going to finish up with just a couple statements. God honors what's done with integrity. Does anybody believe that? God honors what's done with integrity. I'm not a prize peach. But next week, Terry and I will be married 43 years. 43 years. That's almost unheard of in our world today, isn't it? And God has a giant trophy sitting in heaven for her one of these days for putting up with me for all these years. Okay? Integrity matters. God honors integrity. Let your yes be yes and your no be no. Don't piddle around. Don't beat around the bush. Don't come up with excuses. Be who you're supposed to be and do what you're supposed to do. That's integrity. And more than that, integrity is doing what you're supposed to do whether somebody's watching or not. Okay? And the last thing I want to leave you with is this. You never know for sure how God's going to work things out in your life for His glory. Do you? Naomi didn't. Ruth didn't, because she didn't know that much about God. Who do you think Ruth is learning about God from? Naomi or Boaz? Boaz, right? She said, I'll serve your God. My God, the mean God. Boaz is blessing her. Boaz is doing everything he can to try to make her life better. Boaz is showing her who God is through his actions. And isn't that what we're supposed to do for people, no matter what we're going through? Can we still trust in God even though the storm's a little choppy and the waves are coming in and the clouds are blowing down everything around us? Can't we still trust in God then? It's the people who live their lives like that who can make a difference in God's world. Okay? Father, we thank you for this day. We thank you for your goodness and your mercy. We thank you for this story that we've been dissecting for the last 9 weeks. Lord, as we finish up next week, I pray that we can bring everything around to fulfillment so we can see why we spent so much time looking at these chapters. Only 4 chapters. But Lord, I run into people all the time who can tell me, well, I've read through the Bible 10 times in my lifetime. And they can't tell me one story, they can't tell me one verse, they can't tell me anything about what they read because we've been trained just to read it, not to understand it. And my job is to equip people to rise to the full stature of Christ. And as we do that, Lord, we have to explain your word in terms that people can understand, with illustrations that people can understand, so that we can become the people of God that you want us to be. And Lord, I thank you for this picture of Boaz in the Scripture. And some people out there in the world would say, well, it's just a made-up story. No, it's not. It's a real person. Real person. Real people in real situations. And the amazing thing is, even though it's almost 3,000 years removed from us, the same principles still apply today. God honors people of integrity. People who don't have integrity, they don't have a good reputation. And Lord, I pray that you would help us to understand as we face what we're going to face later on in this year. It's time to go to the election booth. We need to find out who's running and find out what they stand for and find out what they've done and find out if they have integrity. And that's a very hard thing to find in our government today is integrity. But Lord, if somebody doesn't do their homework and they just throw a vote out there when it's time in November, and that's a ways off, they're culpable for whatever happens. And if somebody doesn't do their work and doesn't vote, they're culpable. And Lord, when we do business, when we help other people, may we not do it for the recognition. May we do it out of the thankfulness that we have in our hearts for who you are and what you've done for us. God, when we look at our lives and we see all the many blessings that you've given us, all the times that you've helped us, all the times that you've brought people into our lives at just the right moment, and all the people who've invested in our lives and all the people who've made a difference, Father, I pray that we would not just think about them, but we would think about the fact that there you are again working behind the scenes. There you are nudging us, helping us, getting us to the place where we understand that you are God and that we need to have a relationship with you, and we need to turn our lives over totally and completely to you, not for every little dumb decision that we make, Father. We don't have to ask you where we're going to have toast or biscuits for breakfast in the morning. That's what some people do, but that's not what we're supposed to do. We just need to trust you. And Lord, as we learn about you, you give us wisdom and knowledge. And then you give us the freedom to apply that wisdom and knowledge to our lives as we make the decisions that we make. And then we have to realize that we're responsible for the decisions that we make. But in our culture today, everybody is a victim. Everybody's got somebody else to blame for wherever they find themselves, whatever their circumstances are. And that's just not true. We need to have enough integrity to admit when we're wrong and be humble enough not to walk around with our chest puffed out, strutting around when we're right. Lord, help us to be like Boaz. Help us, the ladies, to be like Ruth. She was a virtuous woman, a woman who did what she said she was going to do, who took care of her mother-in-law, who was kind to somebody who was bigger. And Lord, I pray that as we make a difference in each other's lives, that you would cause us not only to grow stronger in our relationship with you, but that we would grow closer in our love for one another. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. All right, we're going to sing one last song together. The only way that we can have victory in Jesus, the only way that we can understand was a sinner neath a load of guilt and shame, I realized that I needed a Savior, and that was Jesus. And I understood who He was. Right? He touched me. My life is not the same. I'm whole. You hear that? That one song right there tells about what God does in us and what He can do through us. Because the fourth part of it is, I'm going to tell everybody I know what God's done for me. That's the way it works. It's what we're supposed to do, right? Thank you all very much. We have a few announcements before we're done. And we're going to do first, everybody have a seat, except students and teachers. If we have any students, teachers, or people working in the education system, please stand. Students, we have any students? We have a couple, one up there, we have one over there. A lot of our kids are still on vacation. I want to pray for our kids as they go back to school. And pray for the teachers that are going back to school with them. You know, we've got Christian teachers that are teaching in the devil's workshop. Does that make sense to everybody? And we have students that are going there. They're going to be influenced by lots of things. And we want to pray that our kids stay close to God and that our teachers pray for them and talk to them and help them understand how amazing God is. Father, we thank you for this day. And I pray for all of our school systems, for Bedford, for Mineral County, and for Allegheny County. God, for those who are teachers in those systems, I pray that you would use the ones that are godly, the ones who belong to you, not the ones who say it, but the ones who really are. I pray that you would touch their lives and help them to be people of character, people of influence, people of integrity in the lives of their students. And Father, I pray for our students in this world that we live in today. All of us old people could never imagine when we were kids that the world would end up where it is today. I pray that you would protect their hearts, protect their minds, help them to surround themselves with good people, with good character as friends. And Lord, I pray that you would give them the strength they need to get through the school year and the wisdom they need to do the work that needs to be done. And Father, for anybody else that's a janitor, or anybody that's a school bus driver, or people who are involved in the sports teams and things like that, I pray that somehow or another that you would send people into their lives, if they don't already know you, who would help them. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. Yes, the spiritual maturity class that we've been talking about, that's been on the website, or not on the website, on the Facebook page and in the newsletter. We are bumping that back a couple weeks till September the 13th. Is that right? September the 13th. Anybody that's interested in spiritual maturity class, it's a one-night offering. We're going to talk about how to practically grow in your relationship with Christ to become spiritually mature. If you're interested in it, contact Jen through the church email or whatever. Talk to her, talk to me. Let's get your name on the list. We got so far about 3 people that are interested in doing that, so it's not like there's nobody that's interested. But if I was to go around and poll the room and say, how many of you need to go to the spiritual maturity class, I would bet all of us could say, yep, we need a little bit more knowledge, a little bit more understanding, a little bit more practical. How do we do it? Okay? All right, that's what I need to talk about.
The only thing we have going on this week is Thursday. We have our full kids meeting at noon. The menu for that is meatloaf. The meatloaf guy. Meatloaf and sides. So if you are retired, looking to be retired, married to somebody who's retired, have the day off work, whatever, just meet us at 12 o'clock over in the fellowship hall. We'd be glad to have you. The spiritual maturity class on September the 13th in the evening, that's at 6 o'clock. It is the only activity on Sunday night for the month of September. So just so that you know, so you can, make plans to be with family or whatever, that's the only thing we have going on. The curve game is still August the 29th. The tickets have already been purchased. That's August the 29th at 6, and it is a fireworks night, and I'm going to let Terry talk about the church picnic. Church picnic Sunday, September 20th, right after church, Constitution Park, Pavilion number 2, and church will provide hamburgers, hot dogs, and chicken, as usual, and the paper products. So sign up will be next week, and I think that's it. Have a good week.